Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable, where we bring together always the very best in automotive retail and fixed ops. And this panel is an all-star panel headed up by Gary House of Gary House and Associates. And he's going to go ahead and introduce all the players. Gary, you are affectionately also known as Yoda. So welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Thank you very much, Ted. Appreciate the introduction. I'm very glad to be here with this great panel to talk today about accountability, one of my very favorite subjects.
I know it is, and I think you've got nobody better than the gentleman on here. So, Gary, I'm going to step out of the way, and I'll let you get started.
Thank you, Ted. In those dealerships that are really making it happen month in and month out, no matter what the market's trying to dictate, there's usually a common thread. They have a strong and unbreakable chain of accountability throughout the entire dealership, and they rely on that every day. The leaders of these dealerships invest in their people and they understand the impact that retaining talent has on dealership success. So I implore you, please don't let your current success allow complacency to creep into your chain of accountability. However, I do know there is a problem. This is not a perfect world, and being a leader in the retail automobile industry is not an easy job. Sound accountability management is very difficult in this highly competitive 30-day cycle car business. In many respects, dealership accountability begins with a state of mind. It's the commitment of the employee to deliver the value expected by the manager with no surprises. To move team members toward this state of mind, the leader must create the conditions for accountability and commitment to happen. Building an accountable dealership takes time and effort. There is no quick fix. The results, however, can be groundbreaking and very sometimes earth shaking. Now, I would like to introduce the panel. First, Scott Gregg is from Tucson Subaru, where he's been the fixed ops director for the last 6 years. Scott has a very interesting background. Early in his 43-year automotive career, he spent 16 years working with Carl Sewell's group in Dallas. What a great training ground. Then, Scott and his son opened their own independent repair shop, and after 3 years, he let his son take over, and Scott went to work in service consulting for 7 years with Lee Harkins at the M5 Group. Welcome, Scott. By the way, I'm trying to get my head around the size of your operation at Tucson Subaru. Your website says you have 11 service advisors. How many techs do you have?
37.
Wow, outstanding. Now that's an accountability challenge.
It is. Yeah, it can be a task for sure.
Okay. Next, Tom Rustino. Tom is currently. Oh, by the way, I need to say that I am pleased and proud to say that both of these next gentlemen I'm introducing are client dealers of Gary House and Associates, and we've gotten to know each other very, very well over the years. Tom is currently vice president of operations at the DePaula Auto Group in Albany, New York, which consists of a couple of what I call monster stores because of their size. They are DePaula Ford Mazda and DePaula Chevrolet. Tom and I believe that if we can get the right personnel in place and have them supported by a strong culture of accountability, the potential for combined monthly fixed gross profit in those two stores is in the $2 million range. That's monthly. In my world, $1 million per month fixed gross for a dealership defines a monster, and a monster is a true accountability challenge. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Gary.
Finally, Julian Dragos is the director of fixed ops for the Fred Beans family of dealerships based in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Although the group doesn't have any monster stores in terms of fixed operations, Julian has corporate responsibility for 21 service departments, 6 collision centers, a couple of auto express shops, and a huge detail department. I think that adds up to 30 organizations of shared responsibility with other key management personnel at the Fred Beans Group. This is a totally different accountability challenge. Welcome, Julian.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay. Our first area of focus is on setting expectations for behavior and performance, then defining them, then documenting them, communicating them, and reinforcing them. So here are some of the things our audience would like to know. How do you establish and communicate behavioral expectations or standards? When doing so, do you define what you will not stand for in your dealerships? What types of metrics define your performance expectations? Do these metrics vary by team member? How often do you believe that you need to reinforce your expectations? Scott, why don't you lead us off? Tell us what you think of those questions.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, accountability is definitely a struggle here sometimes. We do have a lot of folks, and the younger people don't seem to embrace accountability quite as well as the older generation, I guess you could say. But I do try to set behavioral expectations by written process. There's expectations that they do certain things or behave in a certain way. And it is I do let them know that that would be a condition for employment here. You know, they can either do it or they can choose to go somewhere else if they want to. Obviously, we don't want that. Retention's a big thing, but they do have to do what they're supposed to do. And then as performance metrics, basically start with industry standards, but we are a pretty high performing store. So I go from there and try to keep bumping everybody's metrics up so that we do continue to grow and improve, and trying to get to that $1 million a month mark. We're close, but not quite there for gross profit, but that's the way to do it. And then I review all the numbers daily. And if needed, I have a one-on-one session with employees if I see somebody slipping or not doing a behavior the way they should be. I have a number of reports I run every day and review. And then also at the end of the pay period, I run a full report that gives me all the metrics. And I go over that with them, every person, on a one-on-one basis, you know, at the end of each pay period. Same thing with the technicians. We run a report every day, give it to the group leaders. We're on lateral support, and they go over it with their technicians, and then I sit in on those meetings from time to time, usually make my way around the shop. So yeah, that's the main thing. You just have to stay on top of it all the time.
Thank you very much, Scott. Tom, what would you like to add?
Gary, for many years, I was taught to manage by eyesight, and I walk a lot and I reiterate policy. And I honestly believe that there's certain policies that I strongly believe in is where to park, make sure we have our uniform on and be on time. And that builds a start of the base of the whole character of that individual. And I just constantly inspect what I'm expecting. And that's the only way you can manage it today, is that you need to know what's in your parking lot, and your people need to know. And if you pass that on to your managers and they have the same belief that you do, and you know it's tough making those people understand that, especially with the younger generation today, you're like a parent to some of these young people. I mean, Scott, you brought that up about younger people. It's a different society today that people are thinking they're entitled. But when I was working, I was excited to even have the job with that person, and I was worried that I wasn't performing to the top level. And you want to make sure that our people are all doing the same thing. It's just watching what we expect, and I do a lot of walking. And when you see a problem, I have no fear to tell them you're wrong, and you got to do that. And you got to tell your managers. Just tell them if something's out of place. I'll tell you once. Unless you want to go home, like you said, Scott, it's condition of employment. That's important.
All right, Julian.
So, yeah, as you mentioned, Gary, our challenges are, I think, a little different with all the different rooftops and the entities. Um, as far as the metrics and the standards that we set within our group, um, me personally, as I've grown in the position, I've learned a big piece of our success has been leveraging what I would consider the um, sort of how we're wired in this business. Most of us are highly competitive, type A type personalities, and when you're talking about all these entities in our group, I leverage that. It's all about sharing that information, publishing the metrics, setting a high standard, and almost letting the group challenge themselves to understand where they are against the group. And nobody wants to be on the bottom when we're sharing information. And so a lot of my approach to the accountability, at least to the metrics and the goals that we're striving for, is get the information out there, share it, not just with managers, whether it be the service managers or general managers, but also we have to show it and share it with the team members. And we have different tools that I believe you may be challenging me on later in the discussion here, that we've adopted within our group to help share that information, get it out to the group. Several years back, I heard what I thought was a very good analogy around reports and metrics. And there's only the only two things you can do when you look at a metric or look at a piece of data, and that is you celebrate it or you go fix something, right? And that's a critical piece of how we look at our information. We set the standard. Especially some like me with all the entities, I can't be in 31 different places all the time. To Tom's point, walking around, I try to do it as much as I can, but I may not walk around somewhere for a couple of weeks, depending upon where I'm spending my time. So it's important to establish the benchmarks and be able to manage by exception to identify. I know where the numbers need to be, and I can quickly identify when something doesn't look right and know where we need to focus our attention with myself and also our team of managers and directors in our group.
Julian, I think that everybody understands that having expectations and activities that relate to those expectations don't mean much unless our people know how to perform those activities, right? Fred has always been a absolute call him a monster about having documentation to support the processes in all the departments of the dealerships. He has a quality service process guide, which I know you have recently updated. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Absolutely. So, yeah, and so every department in our group, not just service, but parts sales, actually new car sales, used car sales, has what's called a service quality process manual. And those were developed actually before my time with the organization. But to your point, they are living documents. And most importantly, at least what I'm most proud of, I feel that is a big part of our success as a group, is these documents were written and are continued to be updated and enhanced by our employees, by our staff members. Obviously a lot of manager intervention with that, but even sometimes there's a lot of input from, the service personnel, service advisors, technicians, to put these processes in place. Obviously having the buy-in is important, in that process. So, and it's a big piece of when we onboard new employees into our organization, it's typically one of the first things we're going to put into their hands. I often try to, especially with someone in a management position, I try to get it into their hands before their first day here. And not that I expect them to read, it's roughly 250 pages on the service side. Not that I expect them to read that from cover to cover before they get here on day one, but To me, it's important to establish that culture and that set of standards, to know that you're coming into an organization that does stand for certain values, a vision, a mission. And that's what I say about the quality process manual as well, is it's constantly changing because our business is constantly changing. But the piece that I think it really establishes that helps us is it's about setting the goal. It's setting the end result. The processes change often. Different manufacturers, obviously throw different variables in place that we have to adapt to. And in our case, geography. We have stores scattered in different parts of the state. We're in 2 states too as well, so we have differences there that present challenges. But it's important to me. It's so important to be able to say that sometimes how we get there is important, but it's knowing where we're going. And I think that's what those manuals do for us, is it establishes and makes it clear to everyone that this is the end goal of where we need to get to, and what we strive for our company, for our employees, and for our customers. And we're gonna give you that guidebook and give you those parameters to work within. And but yet at the same time, it's a fluid document. If there's a better idea, let's talk about it. Let's incorporate it in, and share those ideas across all the stores and all the entities, not just within one rooftop.
Great. Thank you much for explaining that. I am known for frequently saying that we must measure what we need to manage and inspect what we expect. So here are some questions related to that area of focus. How often is your team members' behavior reviewed against your expectations or standards? How do you keep score on your team members or your department's performance? How is performance reported against expectations? How often do you have visible scoreboarding? As a senior executive, how often do you personally review team members' behavior and performance? Julian, let's start with you this time.
Sure. So simple answer is daily. We have whiteboards in every single one of our operations where we've established a set of core metrics that we want to share with the group, and that is consistent. I will say it's we try not to overload too much information on that board. I think it's critical to really identify what's important, and almost what are the driving forces of everything else. I mean, there's so many metrics to look at in this business that obviously we can spend hours doing that, but most of those metrics are an end result of a root cause, right? So we try to identify what those root cause real metrics are that domino effect down to other things, and we post those daily inside every store so that that's shared and visible to the group. For myself, I have a set of basically daily, weekly, and monthly metrics and reporting pieces that I personally pay attention to, and sometimes I'm doing it on my own. Sometimes it's stuff that managers are sending to me. I'm a big believer in that. As much as we have all these great reporting tools, I still believe I think it's important to have the manager still, to some degree, manually grab some information and send it to me, because it just ensures to me that they're still paying attention and not on autopilot and doing the exercise of going in and looking at a number. And again, we're either celebrating it or we identify we have to fix something. We have we have a term that we use a lot that's called at a glance. And it kind of goes with what I mentioned before, as far as we know what our metrics are. We try to look at it at the high level and then determine where do we need to spend our time really diving into something. So every store does a daily at a glance report for their department. And that's really based on 3, call it key indicators. It's what's the health of my department for the day I'm going into. So we would look at things like how many appointments are set up for the day, what does my staffing look like? Do I have everybody here that should be here? Tech counts and things of that nature. Then we look at, how's our health against what goals we've set for ourselves for the month. So pacing numbers, gross profit, things of that nature, effective labor rates. And then the third piece is we look at what's the health of our department long term, right? CSI, retention, are those statistics showing an indication that our department is running well and set up good for future growth. So, those are key pieces that we're looking at really daily, weekly, monthly. And again, as I mentioned previously, all of that's funneling into sharing that and publishing that across the group. So that at a glance report, actually, that I mentioned that a manager does daily, that gets sent out actually to the entire organization, so that again, other stores are seeing and being exposed to what's going on in someone else's rooftop. Hopefully it drives some competition. We also hope that it drives dialogue, for one manager to pick up a phone or pick up and, send an email and say, hey, I saw you're doing a great job with this. How are you doing it? I'm struggling with this. And what ideas do you have? So, so that's how we look at it here.
Great. Scott, what are you doing in terms of scorekeeping and scoreboarding?
Scorekeeping, we for the technicians, for example, we have a performance towards objective report that goes out every day to all the managers, as well as the group leaders. Like I said, they meet with their group, discuss how many hours each one of them ran, where they at versus their objective. And then we also have a 3-day, if they don't hit their objective 3 days in a row, we bring them in. What can we do to help you? What's going on? Try to make sure that they know we have their back. We don't want them to just fail or, feel like they're being left in the lurch. So we do that. We have a morning meeting every morning with the advisors, talk about numbers there, effective labor rate, CSI, things like that. Yesterday, we were discussing, Subaru gives us a walk around report, what their percentage of customers said they did a walk around. So we celebrated the ones that were really good. And then we talked about what we could do to help the ones that were on the bottom end get their numbers up. So we do that daily. Kind of like Tom said, I'd walk around, make sure behaviors are being followed. We have to have our name badge on the right side. Everybody has to have that on. And it is little things like that really set the tone for the whole deal. Everybody's like, what's the big deal about a name badge? Well, it's the fact that you are wearing it, and you should wear it with pride, because this is a good place to work. And that just kind of shows your pride in working here. So, yeah. And then, like I said, we have the one-on-ones after every pay period with all the advisors. I also put together the average of all the advisors, and we look at that to see where they stand versus what the average is. And
Great.
It gets pretty good.
Sounds like it. Tom, what can you add?
Gary, we have a 6:45 meeting that Ted has been part of before, and at the meeting in both stores, we make sure we go over the day before results, the ASRs, and making sure that we're hitting our target. The other thing too about the name badge, Scott, is that we have the name badge, but we also have a lanyard too. It's kind of like their body armor, we call it. Their body armor, they got to have it on every day. And that's the walk around process. When you see somebody not in body armor, it's wonder why the manager missed it, number one. Number two is that we do have the whiteboards, but then we have a weekly sheet, because everybody's got to know where they're going. And if they're seeing it and they're comparing themselves to the person next to them, they got to know it's like a flight pattern. If you're flying a jet or flying a plane, you got a pattern to go on how to get to your goals. And it's just following that pattern, but you got to reiterate it daily. And it's a constant. The 6:45 was created so it's a morning huddle. Everybody, and it gets everybody there on time, and you're ready to do when the doors open. It's the huddle. That was one of the biggest thing, and we're doing the 3-day call-ins with the technicians, but we got to have the huddle every day.
Great. I think it's important to recognize that all of these stores are operating. All the gentlemen on the panel their service departments are operating either with lateral support groups or simple support groups, and that method of team management or group management in the service department really helps accountability. There are several levels of accountability. Level one accountability is the employee is accountable for his own performance. Okay, that's wonderful if that's the level that we're at. Very few car dealers happen to be in that level. The second area happens to be the employees are accountable for each other. That's level two accountability, and the lateral support group concept really enforces that level. Level three accountability, where most dealers are, is top-down accountability, where the manager and the supervisors are accountable for the performance of those that work for them. Okay, well, it's sure easier if the employees are accountable for their own, or if they're accountable for each other, or if both of those work together. Anyway, the last section of questions that I want to talk about are related to responding to both positive and negative behavior or performance. This is probably the area that we, as a whole, in the industry, do the worst job at. We don't give enough attaboys, and we don't respond as quickly as we should to negative performance or negative behavior. There's an old saying that says that we're too quick to hire and too slow to fire in the retail automobile business. So I'd like to know just a little bit, other than through compensation, how do you reward your team members for meeting or exceeding performance expectations? Does it most frequently happen through management recognition, or do you do it through peer recognition? Uh, do you award time off for good performance? Do you provide gifts? Do you give promotional status improvements for good performance? Do you respond immediately when somebody exhibits or fails to meet your behavioral expectations? How do you respond? What are the consequences for a team member who fails to meet clear expectations? So, Tom, talk to us about your feelings there.
I mean, one of the ways that we've done in the past recently is that if someone's done a great job, you throw them 10 gallons of gas or just a little something there to help them out to get them through that period that you reward them. On the other piece, when there's a problem with the CSI piece, we have a written process, I'm sure, like Fred Bean said, where the service advisors, service consultants have a written roadmap. And you go back to that roadmap and you follow, how did we miss process here? And just counsel them that way, but it's a one-on-one, how to make them better. And it's just improving that person with that. But that's one of the biggest pieces, how we improve that process. That's
great.
How you make them feel better.
Julian, anything to add?
Sure. As far as recognition, I feel we do a good job with that. Again, the fact that we're always publishing the numbers, people are aware where they stand. I'm very much a fan of contests, incentives. I would say there's usually not a month or at least two that go by where we don't establish something fun at the beginning of the month for whether it be technicians or service advisors. And obviously, we're tailoring it towards something that we feel is important for our group, to establish. But I think it's fun and important to, go into the month with something that they know they can shoot for and they can strive to win something, whether that be, like Tom mentioned, something of a gift card aspect. On an individual basis, we also do things on a store or group basis to say, the store that can, achieve a goal or perform well. And I'm a big fan of let them choose. It could be some sort of team event. I know we have stores that have elected to do things like go to the go-kart racing as a group and have some fun, laser tag. Could just be a nice dinner out with the group, and we'll usually let the group, establish something they want to work towards, mutually, to say, hey, this is the result we're looking to get. And hey, if we get it, we want to reward you. And how would you like to be rewarded? On the front of, the negative performers, again, it's all about constructive criticism. And I think often what I find sometimes is, especially with the younger generation, we touched on it, is there seems to be a feeling that when we're asking them to do something, or we're trying to get them to do a behavior, that they have to understand more of the why we're asking them to do it. Versus, I don't know, I grew up in the, your boss told you to do something, you did it. And it's a little different today. So I think that's a big piece of the communication, of really building value in, okay, do they understand why we're asking them to do this, and what's the impact, not just on our financial performance, but how does it affect the technician down the line, the parts person down the line, the customer down the line, how does that all happen? So I think that communication is important. Something else we do that Tom kind of mentioned it with CSI is, bringing their own awareness into it. We have an exercise where we'll make a service advisor do their own survey on the customer. And I love that exercise, because it's amazing to say, okay, fill out the survey as if you're the customer, and how would you fill it out? And then the actual survey comes back in, and why was it so different? Where was the disconnect? Right? To say you gave yourself perfect 10s and they didn't. And what can we learn from that? And again, almost self-awareness to the employee to help them, see that value, understand, why we're asking them to do what they do, and hopefully spark improvement.
Scott, why don't you wrap it up for us?
Okay, yeah, I think it is very important to celebrate success. We like to have a lot of fun here. We have a lot of contests. We had a steak and beans contest where the winners got steak and the losers got beans. Stuff like that's fun. Out to dinner, steak dinner, bowling, top golf, all that kind of stuff. Too often we focus on the negative and don't celebrate the positive. And I just think it's very important to keep an attitude of gratitude and power of positivity, all those things. So if you celebrate those things, and it does need to be peer-to-peer sometimes. A lot of times I'll tell the group leaders, hey, tell so-and-so that he did a great job today or last week or whatever. So that's all important. And negatives, you got to get it. It needs to be handled right then. I mean, I used to wait for the best time. The best time is right now. If there's negative behavior, get them in, talk to them about it, make sure they understand what they did wrong, help them to get better. That's what the key to it is, really.
Wow.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you all. Appreciate your input. Great job.
Gary, I've been taking good notes. Julian, I love what you said about having the service advisor do their own survey, okay, and compare. And I think I saw Tom Rustino taking some notes on that one too. I loved that, Julian. That was really strong. And comparing that to how the customer actually responded. And I will tell you this, Gary, I have been in Tom's dealership in the month of December. And by the way, it's dark very, very long in the day, okay? And Tom's huddle on the service drive at 6:45, I tell you, you don't want to even get there at 6:30. You got to be early that morning to get there, because that huddle on the drive, Scott, they're doing the walk around for each other. They are wearing what Tom calls their suit of honor, armor, pardon me, with their name tag, and they've got their lanyard right here to check the tires with every customer, every guest, every time. So Tom Rustino certainly, walks the talk. So I want to thank all of you for being here today. Great panel. Scott Gregg over at Tucson Subaru. Scott, thank you so much for all you do for the fixed ops community. Tom Rustino at the Paula Automotive Group, Chevrolet, Ford, and Mazda. Tom, thank you so much for being a great friend of the fixed ops community. And Julian, I don't know how you do it with those 30 different facilities, but great job to you at the Fred Beans Automotive Group. And thank you so much for all you do for our industry, Julian.
Thank you, Ted.
Gary, you do an awful lot for the industry, and you have been a mentor to so many people, so many great ones along the way, like this panel. Gary House and Associates. Gary, if our audience wants to reach out to you to learn more about what you do to helping dealers, helping the good dealers become the best, like these folks here, how do we find you, Gary?
They find me by go into my website, which is listed on the scroll across the bottom of the page, or my email address, which is also listed there, or they can call my cell phone at area code 561-339-0043.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Gary House and the All-Star panel here today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.